Good morning once again from Mission Control Houston, and welcome to our continuing coverage of SpaceX's 15th commercial resupply mission to the International Space Station. As you can see in this live view from a camera on board the orbiting laboratory, SpaceX is Dragon just a few feet away from its berthing port on the Earth-facing side of the station's Harmony module. Since it was captured back at 5:54 a.m. Central Time, 6:54 a.m. Eastern, the robotics controllers here in Mission Control Houston have been working to maneuver Dragon from its capture point to its eventual installation point, and that's where we sit right now. They're continuing to move Dragon bit by bit, again being controlled from here in Mission Control Houston. You see a lot more people in the room right now as the Orbit 2 team is coming on console to take over for the Orbit 1 team, which oversaw the operations to get the vehicle actually captured. Offgoing Flight Director Anthony Varia and his team will soon be leaving the room, ceding control to the Orbit 2 team, which is going to be led by Flight Director Rick Henfling there in the blue shirt on the right. And the floral print shirt up above is Leslie Ringo. She's going to be taking over at the Capcom position, serving as that voice communication link between the teams here in Mission Control and the crew on board the International Space Station. At this point, the crew is resumed some of their other activities for the day, having successfully captured Dragon. Flight engineer Ricky Arnold, a NASA astronaut, was the prime at the controls this morning, reaching out with the 57-foot-long Canadarm2 and capturing the Dragon spacecraft while both the Dragon and station flew over Canada. Drew Feustel, the current Expedition 56 commander, was backing Arnold up, serving as the comm link for most of the operations, radioing down the crew updates to the teams down here in Houston, and who are working hand in hand with the team out in Hawthorne, California, the SpaceX Mission Control Center, where they've been overseeing Dragon since its launch back on June 29th. For now, though, we're just a couple of feet away. We're going to continue to see Dragon inch a little bit closer as they slowly maneuver the robotic arm, again sending commands from down here on the ground. It'll get closer and closer, eventually get into an initial contact position with the common berthing mechanism there. It's the port on the bottom of the Harmony module. After that, a series of latches will initiate an initial capture, and then 16 bolts will move into place, known as acquisition or acquire bolts. You'll hear us refer to them as A-bolts, and once those 16 bolts are in place, it'll have second stage capture, and we will consider Dragon fully attached to the International Space Station. So we'll follow along and bring you updates throughout. It's going to be a bit of a slow process, but pretty soon Dragon will be attached to the station, along with the over 5,900 pounds of cargo packed away inside and in Dragon's trunk. Of the cargo on board in the pressurized section, so actually inside the capsule, a little over 3,700 pounds, split across a number of different sectors of cargo, everything from crew supplies, things like food and clothes, to over 2,700 pounds of new science investigations supporting dozens of research projects on board the station, spacewalking equipment, vehicle hardware, spare parts, everything from the toilet to computer systems and oxygen generation spares, things of that nature, computer resources, and some hardware for the Russian colleagues on board. And then in Dragon's trunk, in the unpressurized section, 2 payloads, one eco-stress, a science experiment that's going to be studying the water usage of plants on the Earth using the station's vantage point 250 miles above, and also a latching end effector. That's one of the grasping portions of the Canadarm2 robotic arm, one of which currently has Dragon in its grasp. This will be a spare that'll be stored outside of the station should it be needed in the future. So we'll get the signal back with the station in just a couple of moments. Should see that come back very soon. We'll continue to get those views of Dragon attached to the station's robotic arm. In the meantime, we've been taking your questions on Twitter using the hashtag AskNASA. We knocked out a couple during our capture broadcast, and as we have some time while Dragon slowly makes its way in, we'll go ahead and answer a few now. And again, if you have a question, head over to Twitter, use the hashtag AskNASA, and we'll try to get to it during this broadcast. We'll start off with Jamie, who wanted to know how many resupply missions is SpaceX going to deliver in total? Well, SpaceX currently is under contract for 20 missions under their Commercial Resupply Services 1 contract. SpaceX is also one of 3 U.S. companies selected during the CRS-2 contracts, basically the second generation of these commercial resupply services. And under that, they'll be guaranteed at least 6 resupply missions. So 20 already on the books and a minimum of 6 in the years ahead. Those deliveries will run from 2019 through at least 2024. Our next question comes from Akko, who wants to know, is every crew member on the station trained to operate the robotic arm? Yes, they are. All of the crew members will receive baseline training for systems on board the station. All of the crew members in what's considered the USOS, or the U.S. operating segment, which is all of the NASA and the European, Japanese, and Canadian astronauts, will get a lot more, as they can all be considered primes, or the leads for actually operating the robotic arm for events just like this, or even operating the robotic arm during spacewalks or any other of those situations. So they all do get at least a little bit of training, even the Russian cosmonauts, but then the NASA astronauts and some of the international partners will usually be considered prime. Next one comes from Sean, who wants to know, how's the unpressurized cargo unloaded and stored? A couple of you were asking about that. The astronauts themselves do not interact with the unpressurized cargo at all. All of it is gets unloaded robotically, so actually using the Canadarm2 that's currently attached to Dragon. Robotics operators here on the ground will use the arm, or sometimes also the Dexter robot, a special attachment that allows for more finely tuned tasks on the arm to actually unload the cargo and then attach it to different points around the station. Some payloads get put on to experiment platforms, like the external platform outside of the Japanese experiment module. Others will get put on spare storage locations that house a number of different spares for different systems across the station. Next one comes from Jason Green, wanted to know, will the solar arrays attached to Dragon capsule will the solar arrays stay attached to the Dragon capsule while it's berthed to the station? Yes, they will. They do not detach. Our next one comes from Mika, wants to know, does the station have a refueling capability? So, for example, if Dragon happened to have too little fuel left, could it be refueled? It does not have fuel for that purpose. Dragon's propellant, it has to bring all it needs with it. Station does get refueled, but not by Dragon. Station actually has a lot of fuel tanks that it can use for thrusters on the station itself, which are located over on the Russian segment, and that fuel gets brought up and replenished by the Russian Progress vehicle. Those boosters on the Russian segment can be used to actually change the station's altitude to raise and lower it, but more commonly the Progress vehicle itself will dock to the station and then fire its engine to raise the station's altitude, which they do pretty routinely throughout the year. As the station is in low Earth orbit, it is in outer space, but there's just enough of an atmosphere that causes a little bit of drag, which will slowly lower the station's altitude over time. And so flight controllers have to routinely boost the station back up just to make sure it stays up there.
Ground 1 for Oleg and Sir.
Our next question comes from Lee Damasker, who wanted to know, when will the first Crew Dragon send people to the International Space Station? So SpaceX under contract along with Boeing to begin flying astronauts from U.S. soil in the not too distant future. The current target flight test dates have SpaceX's uncrewed mission in August of this year, and then their first crewed mission in December of this year, December 2018. And if you want to follow the progress for SpaceX or Boeing as they continue to develop and move closer to these really exciting dates, you can always head over to nasa.gov/commercial crew to see all of the latest news, all the latest dates as well. Our next question comes from Daymac, who wants to know, is the docking procedure automatic, manual, or both? I think the answer would probably be both. Dragon primarily flies to the station in an automated fashion, computers on board the vehicle controlling it. Ground controllers can augment its path or fix any issues, but the approach is largely automatic until it gets into a series of checkpoints where Dragon gets commanded during its final approach, and then the actual capture, so the use of the robotic arm to reach out and capture Dragon, is manual. That's done by astronauts on board. And then this installation procedure that we're watching right now, also manual, but it's being done by controls being sent from the ground. Our next question comes from Fodor, who wanted to know, will the Dragon burn up on reentry or will it carry science results back? It will carry science results back. SpaceX's Dragon, currently the only cargo vehicle capable of re-entering the Earth's atmosphere and splashing down or landing. All of the other vehicles currently resupplying the space station do burn up on reentry. So Dragon prime for bringing back a lot of science samples. The vast majority of samples that come back on a Dragon nowadays, as again, it is the only one right now that can survive re-entry. Next question comes from Wood 4000, wanted to know, will Crew Dragon support docking? It will. And that's something we touched on a little bit earlier. There's a difference between docking and berthing, which is what we're watching today. The original cargo Dragon that we're currently looking at was designed for berthing using the common berthing mechanism. Berthing allows for a much larger hatchway, which was something ideal for cargo vehicles. You can bring up much larger payloads. It does require the vehicle to get robotically captured and attached, though. There's no active mechanism on the common berthing mechanism for a vehicle to just fly up and dock. That requires a different type of docking port. There is one called the International Docking Adapter, actually on the very forward end of this Harmony module that was delivered by a different SpaceX Dragon, well, actually delivered by this SpaceX Dragon back in July of last year. And the Crew Dragon will support docking, and future versions of the cargo version of Dragon will also be able to dock. And then our next question comes from Tracy Page, who wanted to know, can the station have more than one Dragon docked at a time? It can't currently support more than one Dragon at a time, but it can support more than one cargo vehicle at a time. In fact, the orbital ATK Cygnus is already docked to the International Space Station, and then pretty soon this Dragon will be docked right alongside next to it. We don't have a view right now of Cygnus, but this isn't the first time we've had two vehicles docked to the station. And then once the crew version of Dragon starts flying, we could look down the timeline, but it could be conceivable that you would have a crewed Dragon and potentially a cargo Dragon at the same time. Again, if you have a question, head on over to Twitter. Use that hashtag AskNASA, and we will see if we can get to it with today's broadcast, so keep them coming. For now, we're still standing by. Dragon's going to slowly make its way in. Again, the flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston sending commands to the arm. There's a lot of very precise checks that they have to make before they can actually attach Dragon, using cameras to ensure that the common berthing mechanism on both Dragon and on the station side are clean, free of any um, foreign object debris or anything of that nature, and then doing very precise alignment checks as they slowly inch Dragon in. And again, it'll initially get attached, and then a series of latches will get an initial capture in place, and then once 16 bolts all around the Dragon's berthing mechanism will get locked in place from the station side, and then Dragon will be firmly locked in place to the station and it will be attached. So we'll continue to hang out until then. Again, send in those hashtag Ask NASA questions, and we'll do our best to get to them. And this is Mission Control Houston again. Dragon very close now to getting attached to the Earth-facing side of the Harmony module. It's still grappled by the station's robotic arm, and the robotics controllers here in Houston slowly inching it in towards that berthing port. They move in very small increments and have to do alignment checks all along the way. But everything so far looking good. And this is Mission Control Houston. We'll start to see Dragon get a little bit closer now as the robotics officer here in the room reporting they're about to move the vehicle into what's known as RTL, a ready to latch position. Pretty soon we'll essentially see the berthing port on the Dragon vehicle, the silver ring, actually attached to the station, or at least looking like it's attached. Once it's in there, a small series of latches will go into place to initially hold Dragon in place, and then a series of 16 bolts, acquisition bolts, will drive into place, actually performing a very strong mate, and then that's when we'll consider Dragon fully attached to the station. So again, a very slow, very deliberate process, but everything continuing to move along very smoothly with the robotics operations here in Houston. Getting a little bit closer now to getting Dragon attached to the station. And now we can see Dragon moved into place at that common berthing mechanism on the Earth-facing side of the Harmony module. Getting confirmation that the 4 RTLs are getting into place. Again, that'll just kind of give it an initial latching to hold Dragon in place, and then a series of 16 bolts are going to drive to securely attach Dragon to this berthing port on the Earth-facing side of Harmony. And this is Mission Control Houston, sounding like there was a good alignment on everything, and Dragon now about to go through what's known as first stage capture. So those RTL latch is going to go into place first, and then following that, they'll begin the driving of 16 A-bolts, acquisition bolts, that will firmly hold Dragon in place, and that'll mean that we'll have second stage capture, and that will ultimately conclude our operations for the day, and that'll have Dragon firmly attached to the International Space Station, ready for the crew to begin outfitting the space between Dragon and the station itself, and getting ready to open up the hatch. The current timeline has the hatch being opened tomorrow morning, but we'll see how quickly the crew's able to work through with the rest of the day. They do have a full schedule of activities already planned. Some of that is getting that what's known as the vestibule, so the space between Dragon and the station itself, outfitted with power jumper cables, and then also pressurizing the space between the two, which is necessary before the hatch can actually be opened on either side. There's going to be a hatch on the station side and a hatch on Dragon itself. So getting confirmation we've had good first stage capture. So with that good first stage capture, that means the team's pretty soon going to start driving 16 individual bolts that are going to drive in and perform second stage capture. And again, that's going to firmly hold Dragon in place and conclude this berthing operation. And things continuing to progress smoothly. The robotics operators have configured the arm into its limp mode. So basically, the arm not going to be imparting any forces on the Dragon vehicle at this point, so they can do this second stage capture. Again, they're going to be the driving of 16 individual bolts to securely hold Dragon in place on that Earth-facing port on Node 2, also known as the Harmony module. And then once those bolts are in place, second stage capture and our berthing will officially be completed. And Dragon will be attached to the International Space Station. All right, and while we wait for these bolts to get driven into place, we do have some time to take a couple more questions. Again, if you have any, head on over to Twitter, use the hashtag AskNASA. We'll do our best to get through a couple as we continue to wait for Dragon to get attached in place. Our first one for right now comes from Sign, who wanted to know, if needed, could the astronauts on station return to Earth in the Dragon's current state? They could not. This vehicle is only certified to carry cargo and cargo only. So while it does survive the heat of reentry, it doesn't have any of the necessary systems to actually get certified as a crew vehicle. And kind of in the same vein, our next question from Tony wants to know, is there always an escape vehicle stationed at station, just in case of the need to return the astronauts to Earth? And there is. The vehicles that deliver the crew members also serve as their escape pods, if you will, or their ride home. For every crew member, there's always a seat in the vehicle that brought them up. So, for example, the Russian Soyuz, currently the means of travel to and from the space station for crew members. They will always arrive in the same vehicle that they will always leave in the same vehicle. So those Soyuz stay docked as long as the crew members are on board the station. So there's always an escape vehicle for every crew member. Next question comes from Robin, who wants to know, will the station have new modules in the future? It's certainly possible. The station continues to expand, recently adding things like the Bigelow Expandable Activity module, with current long-term plans looking at what else we could add to the station. Things like an airlock from NanoRacks in the works to fly in the not-too-distant future. So the nice thing about the station is it is modular, and so new things can always be added. The Russian Space Agency Roscosmos still planning to add a laboratory module, also known as MLM, or the Multi-Purpose Laboratory Module, and that'll be a pretty significant addition to the station in the future. Next question comes from Abdullah Timur, who wants to know, is there a dress code at NASA? Notice all the crew in the control room are wearing ties. There is an informal dress code around the center here at JSE, but here inside Mission Control, there is a fairly strict dress code. It is a very professional business environment. Plus, we also like to look our best, and that's why everybody is in very nice shirts and ties. Next question comes from Tango Mike Charlie. Wants to know, how long was the Dragon's trip from Earth to the ISS? Well, Dragon took off at 4:42 a.m. Central Time, 5:42 a.m. Eastern Time back on Friday, arriving just about 3 days later. So it was about a 3-day trip. SpaceX's Dragon typically takes between 2 and 3 days, depending on the station's position once SpaceX's Dragon launches. So this one, in this case, was 3 days. Our next question comes from Marius, who wants to know, how many docking and berthing ports are on the station? As of right now, there's 2 active berthing ports, and they're both now currently occupied by vehicles. There are 4 docking ports on the Russian segment, which are routinely occupied by 2 Soyuz and 2 Progress vehicles. And there is currently 1 docking port on the US OS side with the international docking adapter, and there will be 1 more international docking adapter delivered in the future for an additional docking position for US commercial crew vehicles. And then 1 more we got from Robert, wants to know, do the crew get sent treats? If so, what do they get? The crew does routinely get some treats in these commercial resupply flights, pretty much all resupply flights. It usually takes the form of food that the crew doesn't routinely get access to, things like fresh fruits and sometimes vegetables. Also, ice cream has been known to make its way onto these flights in some of the cold packs. And on a couple of past flights, even getting some make-their-own pizzas. So the crew does always look forward, as it does provide a little bit of an opportunity to get some food that's not in their normal rotation. And you can see things start to brighten up on Dragon and the station here as they are entering into an orbital sunrise. The station and Dragon currently 254 statute miles over the Earth's surface. They're flying just due north of the Hawaiian Islands out over the northern Pacific Ocean on a northeasterly track, eventually going to swing out over the very far northwest corner of the United States over Washington and then cross over much of Canada on this next pass. Station was just over Ontario when the crew captured Dragon using the Canadarm2. And depending on how quickly these bolts get in over the next couple of minutes, maybe over Canada again, once Dragon actually gets berthed. We'll keep an eye on the map and an eye on the time, but getting very close now to Dragon being fully attached to the International Space Station. And just getting a report here in Mission Control Houston, the A-bolts are in place. That call came just at 8:52 a.m. Central Time, 9:52 a.m. Eastern Time. The station flying 255 statute miles over the northern Pacific off the west coast of the United States. But again, all 16 of those bolts in place. Dragon now squarely attached to the International Space Station. Again, that time 8:52 a.m. Central, 9:52 a.m. Eastern. So with that second stage capture confirmed and Dragon now attached firmly to the International Space Station, the work's going to pick up for the crew inside. They'll have a couple of activities today to outfit the space between the vehicle itself and the station before they eventually get the hatch open. Timeline currently calling for the hatch to be open tomorrow morning, but not uncommon for the crews to get ahead of schedule and get the hatch open early. Once it's open, they will have about 4 weeks of cargo and science activities before Dragon eventually makes the trip home. But with Dragon attached, the real work about to begin for the crew on board. They're going to be executing dozens of different science experiments over the next month, ranging from everything from cancer studies to new technology demonstrations, a floating robot AI assistant, and a number of other technology demonstrations, along with an external payload in Dragon's trunk that's going to get removed by robotic operators here in Houston. That's going to be studying plant stress and water usage back down here on Earth. So a lot of exciting stuff that's going to be unloaded out of Dragon over the next couple of weeks. So be sure to follow along as we bring updates on all the science online across our various social media platforms, and as always on nasa.gov/station. Dragon going to be attached for the next couple of weeks, but again, very flawless operation today. Dragon in place, and the 15th resupply mission from SpaceX now arrived at station. So with that, we are going to go ahead and conclude our coverage for today. I want to thank you for waking up early and watching the crew capture Dragon, and now the Dragon installed. We hope we got a couple of questions answered. So thanks to those of you who sent your questions in on social media using the hashtag AskNASA. We appreciate it, and hope you enjoyed some of the answers. With that, though, I will stop rambling this morning. I want to thank you again for tuning in, but we will go ahead and sign off. This is Mission Control Houston.
In Station Houston and 2, we are back with you, ready for your ISO question.
Dudley, Drew will be with you in just a second. Huntsville station on 2 for the CGBA.
And we're with you on 2 for CGBA.
Okay, for 3.6 in the procedure for opening the lid, you cannot open the lid now because the MVP underneath of it inhibits the locker door from opening far enough to remove the payload from the rack.
And we copy. We're going to check down here on the ground, and we'll have more words for you soon.
In Huntsville, this is Drew on 2. I have opened the MVP about 8 times, and so I'm familiar. It looks like the locker power is off and the unit is off, and if you guys are okay with it, we can pop that off and give them access to opening the payload above.
We're checking on that.
Houston station on 2 for ISO.
Go ahead, Drew. We are ready to copy.
Yeah, for the Node 2, Deck 2 cleanouts, two of the items in there are CTBs number 4115 and 4113. And I believe those have SpaceX ballast in them, and those are the not returning bags, but you're calling those out as, I think, items like 402 and 403 or something like that. They're actually, the labels on them say SpaceX return 401 and SpaceX return 400. So 4115 is 401, 4113 is 400. Those are the same bag labels that we have on the crew preference and the crew care return bags for SpaceX 15.
Hey, Drew, we copy and we're checking.
Station Huntsville, space to ground 2 for Drew and SGBA, CGBA.
Go ahead, Huntsville on 2 for Drew.
Hey, Drew, we're good with your plan.
Okay, again, it's powered off. It'll just take me 2 seconds to pop the door open for Ricky, and then he can do his work, and then we can reinstall it.
And we copy all. Thank you.